The stars were silent. Not the beautiful kind of silent. No, this silence carried weight. Like a battlefield after the last scream. Like a memory that refuses to fade. The kind of silence that stretched across galaxies, pulsing with a shared fear. They didn't speak of Earth anymore. Not in the councils, not in the archives, not even in the whisper markets of outer rim stations. When a species is spoken about only in silence, it means one thing: they've become legend. And legends, especially the dangerous kind, are best left undisturbed. But legends have roots. And this one began, like most nightmares, with good intentions. When the Terran Accord signed its final peace treaty with the Galactic Coalition, the ink hadn't dried before the tension returned. Not in documents or declarations, but in stares, in cautious movements, in the way alien diplomats shuffled papers with hands that trembled ever so slightly. Humans were respected, yes. Admired? Maybe. But mostly they were feared. Because humans didn't evolve for war. They adapted to it. That was the difference. The cold truth that sent ripples through every alien command center from Delta Vega to Miros Prime. While other species bred warriors, trained tacticians, or engineered machines of conquest, humans turned trauma into instinct. History into reflex. Peace was their dream, but war had become their default mode of survival. No one understood that more than Commander Halden Reese. He stood near the viewing bay of the TSV Horizon's wake, staring at the mess of stars beyond. A few crew members whispered behind him, watching him with a mix of admiration and caution. They knew his file. They knew what he'd done. He didn't smile. He hadn't, not in years. Because when you've watched entire worlds burn, when you've ordered strikes knowing families were beneath those coordinates, when the name human alone causes enemy fleets to retreat, smiling feels dishonest. "Sir," a voice behind him said, soft but clear. He turned slightly. Lieutenant Vera, his communications officer. Young, precise, too stubborn to fear him the way others did. She handed him a data slate. "They've responded," she said. "But not the way we hoped." Halden didn't need to read it. He already knew. The Threx Dominion, a brutal expansionist empire that had recently started pressing into neutral space, had made their move. And now they were knocking on Earth's doorstep. "We warned them," Halden muttered, eyes returning to the void. "Yes, sir," Vera replied. "Repeatedly. Then it's their mistake." She hesitated. "They've captured a human colony. Small one. Not strategic. But families, sir. Kids." Halden inhaled sharply. That mattered. That always mattered. The Threx likely thought it would go unnoticed. That humans had grown soft in their peace. That they'd forgotten what it meant to bleed for their own. But they hadn't. And now the game would change. Word would spread fast. A single colony, hardly more than a research outpost, would become a trigger. Not because of its importance, but because humans took losses personally. Halden had seen it before. The moment when peace-loving scientists became reluctant soldiers. When aid workers picked up rifles with shaking hands and grim resolve. When fathers and mothers stopped weeping and started calculating. The rest of the galaxy always assumed humans wanted war. They didn't. But if you forced them into it, if you made them fight, they would become something terrifying. Not because of rage. Not because of strength. But because of memory. Because every war they'd fought, every loss they'd endured, every scar buried in the DNA of their species, it all came back. Halden clenched the slate in his hand. "Prep the fleet," he said quietly. "We move at dawn cycle." Vera didn't argue. "Yes, sir." She moved away, tapping commands into her interface. Around them, the ship began to stir. Quietly. Like an old predator waking from sleep. No fanfare. No speeches. Just the weight of understanding. They didn't want this. But they'd finish it. Meanwhile, thousands of light years away, in a dusty red chamber deep within the Threx War Citadel, Commander Virex of the Dominion stood over a trembling alien clerk. "You said they wouldn't respond?" Virex growled. The clerk stuttered, antennae twitching. It was a small colony. No defense grid. We assumed. You assumed wrong." Virex bellowed. The room fell quiet. Even the guards shifted nervously. Virex turned to the hologram hovering above the table. A map of the sector. Human colonies, trade routes, military stations. And then a new marker. Red. Moving. Fast. "Do you know what that is?" Virex whispered, pointing a claw toward the icon. "And no, Commander. That," he said, voice like ice, "is a Terran dreadnought. Moving faster than any of our ships ever have. And it's not coming alone." The clerk looked like he might collapse. Contact the Upper War Council, Virex ordered. Now. Because deep down, even he, a veteran of dozens of campaigns, felt it. The humans weren't invading. This wasn't conquest. This was something worse. Retribution. Back aboard the Horizon's wake, the crew moved with eerie calm. There were no speeches from Halden. No promises of victory. Just silence. Focus. Discipline. The kind that came from knowing what you were fighting for. In the lower decks, engineers strapped explosive drones into launch bays. Medics prepped emergency pods in quiet prayer. Pilots ran checklists while glancing at photos of loved ones taped beside their controls. One technician, a young man named Leo, sat with his head resting against a wall. His fingers traced the edges of a charm his sister had made him before deployment. A simple thing, scrap metal shaped into a tiny star. But it meant something. Reminded him why he was there. "I'm scared," he admitted to the woman sitting next to him, a fellow tech named Nia. She nodded. "We all are. I thought we were done with war. I thought we changed." Nia's eyes were tired. "We did change. We learned. We built. We healed. Then why are we doing this? Because someone forgot we could still fight," she said softly. "And now we have to remind them." Leo didn't reply. He just held the star tighter. Back on the bridge, Halden's fingers hovered over the fleet-wide comms. He hated this part. He hated all of it. The cycle. The blood. The inevitable pull back into the dark. But more than that, he hated what it meant to be human. To be forced into becoming what the galaxy feared. To be right about every warning they'd ever given. He tapped the comms. "All ships," he said, voice low but steady, "prepare for engagement. No quarter. No mercy. We recover our people, and we make sure the Threx never forget what it cost them." A silence followed. Not of doubt but of grim agreement. In his quarters, Halden stood before a framed photograph. An old one. Faded from time. A young girl laughing, arms around his neck. His daughter. She died during the Sorin uprising. Another conflict humanity hadn't started. Another one they'd been forced to finish. He hadn't fought for revenge back then. He hadn't fought for justice. He fought because he couldn't bear not to. Because something inside him, the thing that all humans carried, rose up when pushed too far. It wasn't hate. It was duty. And it never went away. Now history was repeating. But this time, they were ready. In the blackness of space, the human fleet emerged from hyperspace like a storm. Dreadnoughts. Carriers. Interceptors. All silent. All waiting. And on a planet below, where the Threx had chained civilians, posted propaganda, and laughed at humanity's apparent weakness, the sky began to change. At first just a shadow. Then a roar. And then fire. But this wasn't the attack. It was just the beginning. Because humans didn't rush in with chaos. They planned. They calculated. They made every strike count. And they never, ever forgot what was done to them. On the Threx command ship, alarms screamed. Generals shouted. And somewhere in that confusion, Virex stood alone at the viewport, watching the Earthborn ships descend. "They warned us," he muttered. No one responded. Because it was already too late. This wasn't an invasion. It was a reckoning. And in the heart of every human on board, be they soldier, engineer, or medic, burned the same thought. We didn't choose this war. But we'll end it. The ground shook gently beneath the boots of the Threx guard station near the holding pens. At first, they thought it was local seismic activity. This planet, like most in the outer bands, wasn't fully stable. But then came the hum. Oh, it. Familiar, even to those who had never fought humans before. The hum of Terran engines. In the dim holding cells, the human captives stirred. They had been locked away for 13 days, scientists, engineers, even children. Their hands were bound, their faces hollow from rationed food and the fear of what would come next. Among them sat Dr. Sarah Lorne, her white coat now torn and stained. Her arm was wrapped in a makeshift sling, and her gaze was fixed on the tiny flickering ceiling light above. She hadn't spoken much. Not since the Threx soldiers had dragged away the elder technician, never to return. She had warned them. Pleaded. Negotiated. It had done nothing. Across from her sat an old miner named Rook. Big hands, big heart, too stubborn to stop trying to comfort the younger ones. "You hear that?" he said quietly, voice raspy. Sarah nodded slowly. "Terran engines. You think they're here?" She didn't answer. She didn't want to hope. Not yet. But deep down she knew. If a single signal had made it out before the comm towers were destroyed, if the emergency beacon had pinged for even a second, then Earth had heard. And if Earth had heard, Someone was coming. Outside the facility, black smoke coiled into the sky. Precision strikes had taken out key outposts, radar towers and long-range artillery, all without civilian casualties. It was the kind of strategy only humans would care about. Other species might have glassed the region. Quick, clean, done. But humans? They wanted their people alive. Commander Halden stood on the bridge of the Horizon's wake, watching as dropships broke through the lower atmosphere, flanked by gunships. Their mission wasn't destruction, it was retrieval. Rescue. The deeper target, punishment, would come later. Vera stood beside him, monitoring dozens of feeds. "We're reading strong resistance around the holding sectors," she said. "They've reinforced with orbital batteries. Could be a trap." "Let them try," Halden muttered. "Deploy hammer teams through secondary vectors." "Quiet. Fast." "Yes, sir." Vera paused. "Do you think they'll try to use the captives as leverage?" Halden looked at her, and for a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Not anger. Not even fear. Weariness. "They already tried," he said. "That's why we're here." Far below, the Threx war leaders shouted commands into their relays. One of them, General Akroth, watched his monitors in disbelief. How had the humans gotten through the perimeter so quickly? They weren't supposed to respond this fast. Intelligence had said Earth was inward-facing now, focused on rebuilding. Soft. But what the Threx never understood, what most species didn't, was that humanity had never been soft. They were tired. And being tired of war didn't mean you forgot how to wage it. In a secure command room, Akroth barked at his advisors. "Why didn't our sensors detect the fleet sooner?" One of them stammered. "They dropped from hypertranslation inside the detection ring." "It shouldn't be possible." "It is if you don't care what it costs your engines," another muttered. "They probably burned out half their calibration to make that jump." "Insane," Akroth hissed. "No human." Back in the holding cells, another low tremor rippled through the floor. This one was different. Closer. Sharper. It wasn't tremor, it was movement. Explosions? No. Breaches. Sarah stood, bracing against the wall. "They're coming." Rook nodded, moving quickly to the children, ushering them to the back. "Get ready to move. Fast." "Move where?" one of the younger captives whispered. "To the people who don't leave their own behind," Rook said. Outside, smoke rose over the compound walls. A trio of Terran operatives in matte black armor breached the outer corridor, dropping Threx guards with silent precision. No wasted shots. No wild movement. Just cold, practiced efficiency. The leader raised 2 fingers and moved toward the locked cell bay. His helmet camera streamed directly to Halden's console above. "Team 7 in position," came the static-laced voice. "Eyes on the hostages." "Proceed," Halden ordered. Back in orbit, other Terran vessels intercepted Threx reinforcements attempting to enter the atmosphere. The humans didn't speak much. There were no threats broadcast, no declarations. Just clean, silent action. The kind that spoke louder than any warning ever could. And across the galaxy, on council worlds, on independent stations, even on outlaw freighters, the footage began to spread. The Horizon's wake. The black dropships. The precision. The fire. People whispered. Not about politics. Not about tactics. About them. The humans. The ones who didn't start wars, but who never lost them. In a private chamber aboard the Threx flagship, a historian watched the stream unfold, hands shaking. She had studied Earth. Had even spoken once to a Terran diplomat years ago, during peace talks that now seemed like a dream. She remembered what he had said so casually over bitter tea. "We don't like being called warriors. It's not who we are. But we'll become it if you force us. And you will regret that." Now, watching the nightmare unfold on a world that had never known human soil before, she realized. He hadn't been threatening her. He had been warning her. And the galaxy had ignored it. On the ground, the first cell doors burst open with a metallic scream. Light flooded the room. The captives flinched, then blinked in disbelief. Terran soldiers in dark armor. Weapons ready. Visors scanning. One of them removed his helmet, revealing a lined face, eyes scanning for danger. "We're here to get you home," he said. A small sob broke the silence. A child ran forward and was caught mid-leap by one of the soldiers. Others began to move, quickly, following train signals, no questions asked. Sarah looked back once as she followed them into the corridor. The place that had felt like a tomb for almost 2 weeks was now alive with energy. Controlled. Focused. Human. She had never been so glad to hear the word orders barked in her own language. As the last of them exited, a low thrum shook the walls. Explosives. Time. Set to collapse the facility behind them, so it could never be used again. Sarah turned to the soldier guiding her. Why are you risking so much for a small colony? The soldier didn't even pause. Because you're ours. And that was the truth at the heart of humanity. They didn't fight for territory. They didn't fight for pride. They fought for each other. Every life mattered. Every name remembered. Every loss carved into their soul. And that was what made them so dangerous. Because when a species like that goes to war, it doesn't stop until everyone it loves is safe. Or until there's nothing left to fight. And somewhere, far beyond the smoke and screams, the Threx High Council finally understood. They hadn't conquered a colony. They had awakened a force they never truly understood. And now, it was coming. The extraction wasn't smooth. Halfway through the escape corridor, the lights flickered. Something jammed the evac signal. The comms went static. The rear doors sealed on their own. And in that breathless moment of silence, the human soldiers knew it wasn't over. Commander Halden watched the blip of the rescue team stall on his monitor. Vera leaned closer, checking power feeds and atmospheric interference. The data was jumbled wrong. That kind of signal loss wasn't environmental. It was deliberate. They've trapped them, Halden said, his voice like cold steel. Should we send reinforcements? Vera asked. He hesitated, then shook his head. Not yet. We don't know where the trap leads. On the ground, Sarah could feel the shift in the air. The soldier who had been guiding her, Callan, he'd finally said his name, turned sharply, gun raised. Behind him, the others formed a tight shield around the civilians. They moved fast but not panicked. Everyone could feel it. Something was coming. The Threx weren't retreating. They were baiting. Suddenly the walls shook. From the ceiling above, a deafening crack tore open a gap. Dust and steel rained down, and from it 6 Threx warsuits dropped like monsters. Massive exoskeletal frames, bristling with plasma blades and impact cannons. The soldiers didn't blink. They opened fire. The corridor exploded in light and sound. Sarah dropped, covering the child beside her, trying to shield her with what little strength she had left. The Terrans pushed forward, using themselves as cover. One of them, crouched near a junction box, tried to reroute the jammed signal. His armor sparked under enemy fire, but he didn't stop. Back on the horizon's wake, Vera gritted her teeth. Their position is flaring. Heavy energy spikes, combat level. Halden's jaw tightened. He didn't speak. Vera turned to him. If we don't send backup, they won't hold. We send more, they close the trap tighter. They want us to pour bodies into that hole. Then what do we do? Halden stared at the screen. We change the rules. Below, Callan shouted through the static. Secondary breach route. 2 levels down, move now. The group shifted under fire. A second soldier, Lena, held the rear, laying suppressive rounds. Then she was hit. Not dead. But down. She waved them on. No. Rook yelled, grabbing her vest. You're coming too. Go, she screamed, coughing blood. Asterisk, get them out, asterisk. 2 soldiers dragged her up instead. No one was left behind. That was the rule. Even if it meant dragging one another through hell. The side corridor was narrower, harder to navigate. But it led down into the old power transfer tunnels, a route the Threx didn't know. Or didn't expect them to remember. Sarah ran now. Her legs burned. Her arm throbbed. But the child beside her kept pace, so she did too. They passed broken doors. Old markings. Names etched in Terran script. Names of engineers, builders, those who had founded this place before it was taken. Every step reminded them why they couldn't stop. Then an explosion. A sharp burst behind them. Metal twisted, heat licked the walls. Screams echoed, but not human ones. The Threx had dropped another squad to cut them off. The tunnel ceiling began to crack. Callan turned to the others. We split, he said. No, one of them protested. We have no time, he snapped. Take the main evac group through Tunnel 9. I'll lead the flanking force and draw them away. Callan. Asterisk, do it, asterisk. Sarah reached for him as they turned, wanting to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. All she could do was nod. He nodded back. And vanished into smoke and light. Minutes passed like hours. Every corner felt like a final stand. Every step a choice between hope and silence. But somehow they reached the evac zone. Above them, on the orbital deck of the Horizon's wake, dropship arms released like claws unfolding. Rescue craft plummeted through the atmosphere. Ready or not, this was it. Opening hangar Route 3, Vera said. Halden stood, silent, watching as the first survivors emerged from the smoke-filled hills below. Some limped. Others were carried. But they were alive. Get them out, Halden ordered. But not everyone had made it. Not yet. Where's Team 3? Vera asked. Still nothing. Then a ping. Weak. But real. She tapped into the stream, and the screen bloomed with video. Callan's armor feed. Static-laced but visible. He was still fighting. Not retreating. Advancing. Deeper into the Threx compound, drawing forces away. Alone. Bleeding. But moving. Halden stared at the feed, then opened a comm to command. Prepare orbital strike. Pinpoint. Silent burst. Maximum precision. Coordinates? The officer asked. Halden's voice was low. Callan's location. Vera's eyes widened. Sir, he's still in there. He knows what this is. Are we really going to leave him? Halden closed his eyes for a second. Not long. But long enough to remember his daughter's face again. Her laughter. The way she used to run down garden paths like the world would never touch her. I'm not leaving anyone, he said. We're giving him the only way out he has left. Back in the tunnels, Callan found the core room. The Threx were preparing something. Big. A signal booster. Long-range, wideband. He realized with horror, they were broadcasting. Not to allies. To enemies. Calling in reinforcements. Or worse, provoking a wider war. And if that signal reached past the void, it wouldn't be just one human colony that burned. He looked down at the explosive pack strapped to his thigh. One shot. One choice. He glanced at the recorder in his glove. Blinked it active. Commander Halden, if you're seeing this, I'm where I need to be. They're calling out. Calling something. If this place falls, they'll send more. Maybe worse. I'm not letting that happen. He paused. Tell them I chose this. Not out of hate. Not out of glory. But because sometimes, being human means protecting others even when no one sees it. Even when no one will remember your name. The screen cut. The targeting beacon blinked alive. Halden gave the order. In orbit, the ship's spine split open. A single kinetic slug, wrapped in a silent shield, dropped from the launch tube. Not loud. Not bright. But perfect. As it fell, everyone aboard the Horizon's wake held their breath. Down below, the last of the evac ships lifted from the planet's broken crust. The countdown ticked. And then, the world held still. The climax was seconds away. But no one knew if it would save them. Or unleash something far worse. The impact never came. Not the way they expected. The kinetic strike vanished off the grid mid-descent. No detonation, no seismic reading, no debris pattern. Just gone. Halden stood frozen at the command interface. Around him, the bridge hummed with tense confusion. Vera scrambled through telemetry, rerunning sensor loops, recalibrating feeds. It's not a misfire, she said finally, her voice tight. It launched. Everything tracked correctly until 6 seconds before impact. Halden's fingers hovered over the console. Interception? Vera shook her head. Not possible. No Threx system can scramble that fast at that depth. And we didn't detect any anti-kinetic field. Halden stared at the empty readings, a hollowness forming in his chest. On the ground, the smoke still rose, but there was no crater, no shockwave, no light. Just silence. The kind of silence that didn't belong. Like something had swallowed the blast whole. The evac ships were nearly out of range now, rising past the upper atmosphere. Halden could have ordered their final burn, sent everyone home. But something felt wrong. We need eyes on the drop zone, he said. Vera's brow furrowed. Sir, we pulled everyone out. Not everyone. A second ping flashed across the map. Another signal. Human. But it wasn't from Callan. It came from deeper than his last known position. Far below the Threx compound. Beneath the bedrock. In a layer of the planet that wasn't supposed to be accessible, at least not naturally. Halden stepped forward. Route it to me. Now. Vera did. The signal was scrambled, garbled, until a single image snapped into focus. A face. Human. Pale. Covered in dust. Eyes wide, terrified. The man was strapped to a wall, no uniform, no gear. Civilian. He spoke, his voice cutting through the static. They're not calling reinforcements, he said. They're waking something up. The feed died. Everyone on the bridge froze. Halden whispered, What the hell are they talking about? Vera blinked, stunned. Sir, what else is down there? No one had an answer. Not yet. But beneath the Threx outpost, below the scorched concrete and fire-blackened steel, something moved. A presence. Ancient. Not Threx. Not human. It stirred slowly like something remembering how to breathe. Machines long dormant hummed back to life. Walls made of obsidian and metal that didn't match any known alloy shifted in unnatural ways. Symbols, etched in no language anyone alive could read, glowed faintly across the stone. And in the center of it all, floating silently in a containment field, was a pod. Inside the pod, a humanoid figure slept. Not alien. Not entirely human. Something in between. Something built. Callan stood there, armor half destroyed, weapon down to its last charge. His eyes were locked on the pod. Behind him he could hear distant movement, Threx voices shouting, scrambling, arguing. They had found it, but they didn't understand it. He didn't either. But in his gut he knew this wasn't a weapon meant for war. It was war. Something old. Something sealed for a reason. He activated his visor log. A burst transmission shot upward through what remained of the relay towers. On the horizon's wake, it hit the main feed. Halden watched as Callan's voice filled the bridge again. Commander, they weren't trying to destroy us. They were using the colony to gain access. They knew we'd come. They wanted it to look like a failed attack, just enough to keep us focused on retaliation. Vera whispered, "It was bait." Callan's voice continued, shaky. "They were never going to hold the planet. They were trying to dig. This place, it's some kind of ancient site. Not Threx. Older. Something buried. And now it's waking up." The message cut, replaced by a new feed. A tremor hit the entire system grid, readings spiking across seismic and magnetic sensors. Energy surges rolled upward from the planet's core. And for the first time in hours, Halden's face changed. He looked afraid. Because this wasn't war between species anymore. This was something else. Something even the Threx hadn't planned for. The deck shook slightly. The crew didn't even notice at first. Everyone was staring at the screen. The pod in the underground chamber was beginning to open. Callan backed away slowly, not daring to raise his weapon. Whatever this was, it didn't care about bullets. Then the voice came. Not from a mouth. From everywhere. Not words. Just feeling. Pain. Memory. Rage. War without reason. War without end. The same history humans had tried to bury. The same madness that had nearly wiped them out generations ago. They thought they were masters of war because they had survived it. But now they were standing in the shadow of something that hadn't survived. It had waited. The Threx officers down there started panicking, screaming for extraction. Callan saw one try to fire at the pod. The bolt ricocheted back, vaporizing him instantly. And then the thing inside stepped out. Human-shaped. But not human. Its skin was silver and ash. Eyes like empty stars. It looked at Callan and tilted its head. Not curiously. Recognizing. And then it spoke. Terran blood, again. The lights went dead. The feed collapsed. Every system on the horizon's wake shuddered. One by one, ships across the fleet experienced interference, brief but enough to be noticed. Halden stepped back from the console. No one spoke. Not for several long seconds. Then Halden turned. Sound red alert. Full fleet readiness. Vera stared at him. "Are we at war?" He looked at her. And said nothing. Because even he didn't know what they were now facing. They had come to rescue their own. They had come to punish an enemy. But instead, they had opened a door. And something had stepped through. The fleet held its breath. Every crew member aboard the horizon's wake stared at dead screens, blank sensors and silent channels. For a moment, it felt like the entire galaxy had paused. No orders came. No new signals. Just a cold, pressing stillness stretching across the command deck. Then the emergency channel lit up, one final burst from Callan. It was audio only. Garbled. But they heard the urgency. It's active. It's moving. It's not targeting the Threx anymore. It's coming up. No, listen, this thing, it remembers us. It knows what we are. We didn't build it, but it's built like us. Not just weapons. Anger. It's not just waking up, Commander. It's deciding. The line cracked, fizzled, then cut completely. The blast hit 10 seconds later. Not from above. From beneath. A deep, planetary shudder that tore through crust and rock. The underground Threx compound collapsed inward as glowing fractures webbed outward like veins of fire. A vertical plume of burning debris surged up from the surface. The shockwave shattered clouds, roared across the sky, and struck orbit with enough force to rock even the largest Terran vessels. The bridge of the horizon's wake shook violently. Consoles sparked. Crew hit the floor. Halden gripped the rail, holding his ground as warning lights flashed across the room. "Report," he barked. Massive energy surged from the planet's core. Vera shouted over the alarm. It wasn't just a weapons vault, it was a fusion cradle. "Sir, it used the kinetic strike. Absorbed it. Redirected it down. That thing turned your strike into power." "What is it powering?" A long silence. Then a young sensor officer at the side console spoke, voice shaking. "A ship, sir. Something massive. It's not on any registry. It's rising through the crust now." Halden's blood ran cold. "How big?" The officer swallowed. "It just crossed 2 kilometers and growing. It's not built from any material I recognize. Sir, it's not flying. It's pulling gravity toward itself. It's generating its own field." Another console lit up. The external feed came online just long enough to show it. Rising from the burning fault lines of the planet's surface was something no one could explain. Not quite a vessel, not quite a station. A floating city of war, alive with movement, covered in curved metal like bone and armor fused together. Glowing veins ran across its hull. Entire segments rotated like locked puzzle pieces clicking into place. And at its core stood the figure. The humanoid. Still watching. Still remembering. Vera whispered, "It's not Threx. It's not alien. It looks human," Halden finished, barely audible. Because it did. It didn't resemble any culture in the known galaxy. It looked like something from the ancient Terran archives. From before the Exodus. From before recorded history. From a time when humanity nearly destroyed itself. Before they chose to change. "What's it doing now?" Halden asked. The screen zoomed. It was scanning them. Not targeting. Studying. It ignored the Threx completely. Even as they scrambled and fled in a panic, the ship and the figure inside it didn't react. The Threx were irrelevant. The only thing that mattered now was Earth. Halden stepped forward. "Open a channel." "No encryption." Vera hesitated. "To who?" "To it." She did. Static filled the room. Then a voice. No name. No ID. Just the voice of the thing. "You're Terran. You carry the mark." Halden spoke carefully. "We are. And you?" "I am what remains. The last code. The final weapon forged when war became memory. Buried when peace became unbearable. You forgot. You evolved. But I remained. Why show yourself now? Because you've returned. And war has followed. You awakened me. We didn't mean to. But you did. You built me. Not in metal but in mind. I'm not machine. I am reflection." Halden's hands clenched at his sides. "Then what do you want?" "I want to see if you have changed. If you remember why you ended the Great Burn. If you are worthy of the peace you protect." The ship's lights dimmed. The voice lowered. "Or if you are still children of war." Then, everything went black again. The massive warship hovering above the planet stopped rising. Just waited. "What's it doing?" Vera asked. Halden stared at the blank screen. The pressure in his chest felt like lead. It wasn't attacking. It wasn't speaking. It was deciding. And the answer depended on them. Across the fleet, Terran ships powered down weapons. They stopped targeting. One by one, like a silent agreement, they opened their shields. No orders were given. Just trust. Hope. A gesture. The last gesture. And the figure inside the ship tilted its head again, almost curious. Then the unexpected happened. Not an attack. A message. Not to Halden. Not to the fleet. To all Terran networks. A full transmission package flooded the archives. Images. Voice logs. Footage. Memories. From Earth's forgotten history. Wars never spoken of again. Weapons never rebuilt. Cities lost under treaties no one dared reopen. It was all there. The final war. The one that ended before space travel even began. The war where humanity had built that ship. Not to conquer. But to end everything. And when they couldn't go through with it, when they saw what they had become, they buried it. Not because they feared others would find it. Because they feared they would use it again. Halden watched it all in silence. And in that moment, every soldier, every officer, every citizen watching across Terran space understood. They were not the masters of war. They were its survivors. And the cost of survival was memory. The ship stopped transmitting. Its engines dimmed. Then it turned. Not to attack. To leave. It rose past the edge of the planet's gravity well and slipped into a fold of space no one could track. Vanishing as quietly as it had awakened. Halden sat down, his breath finally returning. Vera wiped her eyes, not sure when she'd started crying. Where's it going? Someone asked. Halden didn't answer right away. Then he said, someplace far enough. Or maybe, close enough to watch us. The fleet remained in formation, silent. Then one by one they turned away from the dead planet. Away from the dust and smoke and the thing that could have ended them all. They had come to rescue a colony. They had come to punish an enemy. But instead, they'd uncovered a truth buried deep in their own bloodline. Humanity didn't win wars because it was strong. It survived them because it remembered. And now the galaxy would remember too. The final twist came later, 2 days after the fleet left orbit. A beacon activated from the edge of the system. Encrypted in Terran code. One line only. Asterisk unit Callan recovered. Awaiting orders. Asterisk. Halden read the message 3 times. Callan had survived. And he wasn't alone. The beacon's signal repeated every 6 seconds. Same code. Same location. Halden stood at the edge of the command deck, staring at it like it was a ghost. They had already left the system. The fleet was 3 jumps out, engines cooled, weapons powered down. The war, for now, was over. But Callan, he was alive. And he wasn't the only one. Vera leaned beside him, voice soft. We don't know what else is out there. I know, Halden said quietly. The message wasn't coming from the planet's surface. It was coming from just beyond it, high orbit, low visibility, riding a tiny dead rock that had never registered as relevant. Now it was lit up like a flare. Rescue teams prepped within the hour. When they reached the location, they didn't find a wreck. They found a pod. Inside, Callan, unconscious but stable. Monitored. Protected. And inside the same pod, stored in a separate memory bank, was another transmission. Not from Callan. From the ship. The voice returned. Softer now. I was created to end war. But to end something you must understand it first. Humanity buried me, not because they feared war. But because they feared they understood it too well. There was a pause in the recording. I watched your people. I watched your choices. You didn't fire first. You didn't conquer. You didn't abandon your own. You chose mercy even when you carried the power to crush. More images followed. Snapshots from the rescue. Soldiers carrying civilians. Medics staying behind under fire. Engineers rebuilding local systems after the evac. And Callan, half dead, still standing, refusing to leave until the last survivor was safe. The message ended with this. You are no longer the reluctant masters of war. You are something else now. When Callan finally woke up, he didn't say much. Just looked around at the familiar faces, Halden, Vera, the others, and smiled through cracked lips. Did we win? He asked. Halden gave him a look. Not quite a smile. Not quite a scolding. Just that look commanders give when they have no idea what to say. You made it back, Halden said. That's what matters. Callan's voice was hoarse. The ship, the thing. Did it attack? No, Vera answered. It made a decision. About what? About us. He closed his eyes and rested his head back. Hope it was the right one. The days that followed were quiet. The fleet returned to orbit around Earth. Debriefs were long, filled with half-answers and broken footage. The Threx Empire fell completely silent. Not a word. Not a movement. They had seen enough. The Galactic Council requested meetings. They wanted details, clarity, confirmation. Earth declined for now. Because what could they say? That humans had built a weapon they couldn't control? That they had buried it beneath a nameless colony and forgotten? That it came back and let them go? There were no policy documents for that. So the humans did what they always did after war. They mourned. They rebuilt. And they remembered. The rescued colonists were relocated. The children who had survived were given new homes, new schools, new chances. Sarah Lorne returned to her research. Rook took a job teaching mechanics to recruits too young to understand what they'd survived. Nia and Leo stayed in the service, side by side, rebuilding the same corridors they once fled through. And Callan? He disappeared from the public eye. Not because he was hiding, but because he didn't want a medal. He just wanted peace. A quiet house. A quiet sky. Maybe a garden. But Halden knew one day Callan would be called again. They all would. Because war might rest, but it never ends. And somewhere out there beyond mapped space, that silent ship still drifted. Not attacking. Not watching. Just waiting. Maybe it believed in humanity now. Maybe it didn't. Maybe it just wanted to be remembered. In the years that followed, whispers spread across the galaxy. Not about new empires. Not about new weapons. But about a species that had once created a god of war, and then chose not to use it. The humans. The ones who didn't crave domination. The ones who didn't conquer. The ones who didn't forget the price of survival. They weren't perfect. They still had scars. But they knew something the others didn't. You can win a war. But to truly survive it, you have to learn not to need one. And that was the real victory. Not the defeat of the Threx. Not the escape from ancient destruction. But the choice to walk away even when you have every reason to stay and burn the world down. So they walked. The reluctant masters of warfare. Masters, no longer by instinct, but by choice. And somewhere among the stars, the last war waited quietly, still wondering if it would ever be needed again. But for now, the galaxy remained silent. And for the first time in a long time, that silence felt like peace.